President Frank was talking about intentionality. And before we sort of move forward, would love to spin it back. And by the way, so you all know, actually, beforehand, I told Dr. Portes, I said, hey, do you want me to share some of the questions? He said, no. I said, no, save it. And so you just ask them and I'll answer them. And the idea of Miami being an emerging global city, in many ways, we were actually at a point in time not too far in the distant past going in the other direction, right? I mean, many people in this room can remember, I'm looking at Ron Sheffield, we've had long conversations about these days, you know, back in, it was November 23rd of 1981, Time magazine, back when Time was, you know, packed a real punch. When something was on the cover of Time, it really drove the conversation nationally, even internationally. And on the cover was Paradise Lost, question mark, right? And this, of course, we were going through the whole period from the McDuffie riots, Marielle, all the cocaine cowboys, all of that. And all of that was also seared into the imagination. We remember, it was 81 when the Time magazine piece came out in November. By 83, the movie Scarface was in movie theaters, you know, all over the world. From 84 to 89, every Friday night was Miami Vice. I mean, all the people were reminded of this Miami again and again. And yet, here we are, some 40 years later, talking about Miami as among the ascendant cities in the world. As we look back over these last 40 years, what are those things that Miami has done so well?
Well, it's true that back in those days, some of you who are older remember that my first book on this was published in 1993. About the city was called City on the Edge. And that book, because the city was on edge at that time. It was on edge because of the issues that you have mentioned. Many people thought that it was going to become a banana republic. Others that it was going to fall into the ocean. It had a very, very bad press. And on top of that, there was a contest in terms of the different leaderships, the emerging Cuban-American leadership and the old style. Leadership that was much, in which Miami resembled primarily as another southern city, like many others in the past. And out of that very unpromising situation in the 80s, here we come to, by a series of unexpected circumstances. Unlike the other two cities that are analyzed here as emerging global, that feature an individual leader that had with an iron will tried to carry what were a collection of fishing villages in Singapore into what Singapore is today, or what was just sand and desert to become that is an incredible city of Dubai. Miami had no single leader. It had no charismatic single person that led to where we are today. It was a concatenation of factors that brought this. If we are going to, I identified in the book, if we're going to identify some people who played a very significant role back when nobody thought anything about Miami, was interestingly, perhaps the leader that was most important here was Fidel Castro. That is the fact that the Cuban government expelled its entire entrepreneurial class, that is the bankers and the economic leaders that had to leave and then had no other recourse than to set foot here and make southern Florida their home, because they had nothing to do. And they were the ones, to a large extent, at the very beginning in the 70s and so on, this coterie of exiled bankers that understood the unique value of Miami's geographical position. In the past, the former leadership of the city talked always about Miami being the capital of the hemisphere, but they didn't do anything about it. That is, basically, Miami was a winter resort for the pleasure and the use by people in the north, New Yorkers, Bostonians, and so on. And that's what they thought. Like Miami was always advertised like that. But these people who came from a Caribbean island, they saw the enormous value of the geographical position. So they marched into Latin America to appraise bankers, business leaders, people with function that to come to Miami, to establish offices here, to establish bankers that come to Miami and invest here. You don't have to go to New York to talk to go in the call and to talk to call bank officers that do not speak Spanish and you try to do. Come to Miami. You can do business in your language. It's warm. And the judicial system and the legal system is the same as in New York. Your properties are protected, your investments are protected, and on top of that, you can throw a vacation by Miami Beach while you are at it. So this message sank slowly but surely. That is, as Latin American banks established correspondent banks here, and then many of these exile bankers were instrumental in the state of Florida passing a law that allowed foreign banks to establish offices here. That was crucial to have not only Latin American but European banks. The result of that, and I'm not going to bore you anymore, the result of that you can see very close to us. That's Brickell Avenue. The Brickell Financial District is absolutely impressive. It's one of the largest in the East Coast. Second probably to Wall Street. It's one of the anchors. And what is Brickell important? Because it is hemispheric. There is investments from all banks in the region, and investors come here and sort of put their money there, and all kinds of operations take place. So that became one of the anchors, of the pillars of Miami as an emerging global city.
So geography, talent, an infusion of talent, international commerce, all conspiring in this case, and drive being some of the foundations for the last 40 years. As we look across the three cities you identify, what are the qualities that all three share? Because obviously there are political differences in a dramatic way between Dubai, Singapore to a certain extent, and Miami. Talk about the qualities that all three of them share that have put them into this category of emerging global city. And while you're at it, to follow up on President Frank's question, define how we should be thinking about emerging and global.
Well, an emerging global city is a city that is beginning to compete in its region of the world with the established global cities, New York, London, and Tokyo, by transcending the national state and the region and the physical place where it is located to become, as it were, floating in a regional area as a center for do business, for investing, for being there, for having encounters and investment, or for buying property. The idea that is the insight that led to this book began with my spending time teaching on several months of the year at New York University campus in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is about 1 hour away from Dubai, so it was very easy to come back and forth. And the idea came to me that the skyline of Dubai had great similarities to the skyline of Miami. These high rises of luxury condominium businesses and so on. And the question I had visited Singapore, which also in Singapore people would say just like Miami. And how were they so similar? Originally it appeared that the similarities were superficial. They just came to be like that. They have big skylines. A lot of people come and invest there and so on. So what we started digging together with my co-author, Professor Ariel Armoni, who was here at the University of Miami before, with my colleagues, collaborators at New York University in Abu Dhabi and others, and in Singapore, and we started discovering that the similarities that you saw in the skylines were not casual. They did not happen by chance. There was something underneath them that make them similar. So what is an emerging global city? It's a city that has a regional profile in which people throughout an entire region of the world identify it as a place, as a central place, economically, financially, and often culturally. The region for which Miami has become important is the Caribbean and Latin America. That's what people started speaking of Miami as the capital of the hemisphere. Well, it is, in a certain sense. Out of those concatenations of events in the 80s and so on, it happens that way that even when business people in Argentina and Peru and Colombia want to get together to create something and to discuss things, do they go to each other's place? No, they come here. They come here. When people in these countries feel threatened by the political convulsions and the dramas that have happened throughout the region and need a place of safety for themselves or for their capital and so on, where do they go? Do they go to Stockholm? Do they go to Dallas? No, they come here. Miami is fixed in the imagery of the entire continent as the place to be for those things. The luxury condominia that are generally not purchased by Miamians. Miamians can buy, but they don't have the wherewithal. They are purchased to a large extent by foreigners, by people who come from primarily these areas of the world, in the region, but now even into Europe and Eastern Europe. Well, to make a story short, so I don't know, the similarities are this. Dubai plays a very similar role in the Middle East. That is the place to invest and be for investors and for capital in India, in Afghanistan, in China, often in Russia. So it is the place to be in the Middle East. It is also the center for long-term commerce. The Jebel Ali port plays a very similar role in the Middle East to Port Miami, which does it for this region. So that now we are going to see Port Miami, the Jebel Ali port, the Singapore port. It's very similar. The airports, the Miami International Airport, how international it is similar to the Al Maktoum and Dubai Airport and the Shanghai Airport in Singapore. So we began to see similarities in the pillars that sustain these global cities. And I'll summarize it: finance and banking, construction and real estate for a market beyond themselves, for an entire region, as it were. Long distance commerce, the port and the airport serving not only the locals but playing a hemispheric role. And fourth, tourism, which was Miami raison d'etre, the thing of being, but that the other two cities have worked very hard at it. Dubai had become a tourist destination out of what it was just desert, and now we see the going. So these are the four pillars on which cities have developed, and out of that, of the tourism, then came the fact that these cities have increasingly become regional cultural centers in the graphic arts, in culture for the region. So that's the place, the role that Art Basel plays here in December, but it's not only Art Basel, a number of other activities, and now we are going to see whether we will have a fifth or sixth with the tech sector. But the similarities were there, and to complete the picture, Singapore plays a very similar role in Southeast Asia. That's the place to be, and that old collection of fishing villages is now the banking center, the financial center, the huge trade center of the area, and it's actually benefiting from the demise of Hong Kong, which was the global city in that region of the world and was already established and so on, but for reasons that we all know, that is a takeover and the threat of communist rule, bankers, law firms, and people are decamping Hong Kong rapidly and basically to the benefit of Singapore. So that's the general picture.
Would you include psychology too? And by that I mean, that as we think about, and we were talking about this last night, as we think about some cities that were previously at enormous heights and are now struggling, in so many ways they have struggled because they have failed to adapt. They've been caught up in internal conflict, turf wars of different kinds. Whereas Miami, young institutions, short history, and really anything goes. Is that something that sort of open mind that is shared in all three of these cities?
Well, they are very different in a sense. Singapore had been ruled by one party, the PAP under its leader Lee Kuan Yew, that it has now passed from the scene, but it's a semi-authoritarian state. There is no question about it, and so is Dubai. Dubai is not a democracy. It had been constructed by two emirs, two sheikhs, one after another, Sheikh Rashid and now Sheikh Mohammed, a father and son that had a single-minded will and effort to do it. But certainly Dubai is not a democracy. Here, there is a difference between the three, is that Miami is part of the American system and is a democracy. And with a democracy, it has a lot of problems, because there are confrontations, struggles, and so on. But out of all of this, I think that the city has come increasingly to understand its destiny, given by geography, as President Frank often mentioned, the geographical one, implemented by a series of other actors, these exile bankers and the people who came and so on. And I think that basically the flow of populations from other countries in the hemisphere that many dreaded at the time that Time magazine number appeared, Paradise Lost. It's going to be a Central American banana republic, all of this. The continuing flows of people to this area that began with the Cuban exodus, but that then expanded to the Nicaraguan population, to and more recent to people from South America and increasing Venezuelans, has not sunk the city. On the contrary, it had added diversity, it has added new energies, and it made Miami much more cosmopolitan. You cannot, that is, contrary to other cities in the South that are still in the hold of the old black-white struggle and the problems of racial inequality and so on. There are serious problems in Miami, but it has become much more heterogeneous, much more cosmopolitan, and that has attracted to this city other actors that were not expected before. Europeans, for example, the population of investors from Spain, from France, and so on, that now see Miami as a place to be. Not that used to be just a vacation, a winter resort. Now it is. So we live in a somewhat less polarized and increasingly cosmopolitan area. Whether we are able to maintain that in the future remains to be seen. But at this particular point in time, the evaluation was that in the competition, in the global system, and believe me, every city in the world competes for recognition. And every city tries to brand itself. It's a question of branding. It's very important. What is the brand that you are selling in New Orleans, in Los Angeles? What is the brand that you are selling in Panama City, in Qatar, for example, that sponsor the football games? Branding. Well, in that struggle for branding, and for Miami has acquired a very positive label, attracting to it not only capital and populations from its immediate periphery in the Caribbean and later on, but increasingly from other places in the world.
So building on all of this, we'll spin it forward and want you to think of your questions. I'm going to be turning to you in just a second. Talking about being intentional and how Miami has changed in really significant ways. And you mentioned the arts. I just want to read something, because I think even for those of us who live here, oftentimes we don't appreciate how things can change so dramatically. And as we think about just the last 13 years, 2006, in terms of arts institutions, 2006, Arts Center opens. 2011, New World Symphony opens New World Center. 2011, Dennis Moss Cultural Center opened. 2013, the Perez Art Museum Miami is open. 2017, Frost Science. 2017, ICA Miami in the Design District. 2019, Rebel Museum, right? So in a span of 13 years, that's 7, right? We're about like every other year, Miami's opening up a new major cultural institution. There's this amazing run and being so intentional, and we can come up with similar examples, about revitalizing our urban core. Obviously, President Pumariega was talking about all of our collective work around tech. But let's spin it forward as all of us together think about Miami's future, as we think about the next 10, 20, 30 years. As we think about where to be intentional, where do you think Miami should be intentional in building on all of the different strengths that you identified?
I think that President Pumariega, in her remarks, hit the most significant point. Talent, talent, talent. Human capital, human capital, human capital. You have the location, but if you don't have the people, the talent that is at the beginning came from another country, that in the form of exile, an exile middle and upper class, but then came from other places, and that is the trend. In the present world, in this competition for recognition and for prominence, to attract this, is aside from, in addition to geographical location, a key factor is the educational level and the skills of the population in order to take advantage of what existed today. If it doesn't happen, somebody was mentioned to me recent before we had this conversation of countries in the Arab world. That is, these countries that are blessed or perhaps cursed with the oil wealth are desperately searching for visibility and increasing significance in the world. They don't have the population. And that is, in part, they have subordinated half of the population, the females, to a position of inferiority in the society. So it's very difficult to out of that, to create something, even if you have all the millions in oil. That in the case of places like Dubai, 90% of the population, they have succeeded in having 90% of the population foreign, coming in, not only workers at the bottom, but what they call their expats, which are Europeans, Americans that have find the place sufficiently attractive, but they have to import it. We have to create it. That is, it's not enough to bring New Yorkers and people from California. We have to create a population that is increasingly takes advantage of the benefits of globality, of the pillars of this economy, and builds on them. Miami Dade College has been a phenomenal promotion machine for immigrants and others coming from all over the world. It had been the vehicle by which generations, one after another, graduated, went through this, and took their place in the world. It's a phenomenal institution that now it's in good hands.